So we put the engine in the car. We have a 2JZ and a BMW. No way. All right, we're gonna be doing a SFI bell housing on this. In order to run Pro-Am, Pro-Spec, or Pro, you need to have an SFI approved bell housing. So what we're gonna need to do is get Chris's self-clearancing tool, AKA his purse, beat the crap out of this trans tunnel and make it fit. And then we're gonna take and cut out what we need to once we put the trans up in there. And we're gonna change out the subframe for a winner's quick change subframe, as well as clearance the back of the car. So in this episode, you're gonna see us transform everything from just a fun, reliable car to a race car, full drivetrain done on it. And then also do the lines. So we paused on our rear mount radiator setup because we need to actually put the new trans in, put the new subframe in, do all of that. And then we're gonna run our radiator lines to go to the back of the car, which we'll show you. And there's two different options you can do. You can run nylon hose, like the Vibrant hose, AN hose, or you can buy piping and weld on AN fittings to the ends of them. We personally like those because if you end up dirt dropping or something, you bottom out the car, you don't actually have to worry about, you know, scraping the lines and puncturing one with the thick aluminum piping. It works really well underneath the car. You can dent it, bend it, however you want it to contour it, and then weld brackets onto it and bolt it right to the bottom of the car. It's very easy. I don't know, what do you think? You like the hard lines or the soft lines?
I like the hard lines better because there's less chance of them starting to droop or anything like that. Because we had it happen with Savio's first rear mount setup where one of the rubber hoses, the strap broke from a dirt drop, ended up rubbing on his drive shaft, and not till like 3/4 of the way through the day did it start leaking coolant and created all kinds of problems. So at least you have a hard mounting solution underneath the car instead of just a whole bunch of hose. Not to mention, that hose is really expensive. Yeah, that'd save you a little bit of money too. I mean, given the aluminum tube's not cheap, but it's something you never have to replace.
Yeah, so you're just buying 2 fittings per tube, so you need 4 fittings and probably 15 feet worth of tube. So, and it's like $6 a foot, so it's not bad. It's a lot cheaper than the AN.
We are probably gonna have to modify our drive shaft safety loop too because we have a big 4-inch drive shaft and I don't think that's gonna fit inside of that. We're gonna find out.
I hope it does, God.
Because that thing is welded to the chassis.
Yeah, some asshole welded it.
So first thing I'm going to do is put our bell housing on there. I'm removing the slave cylinder now. These bolts are very tight. And then I'm going to index the bell housing to make sure it's actually centered for the input shaft of the transmission to be centered on our engine. If not, they sell offset dowels and things like that. And we did have some wear on our input shaft bearing on the dog box when we took it out. So this will now prevent any additional wear, any weird stuff happening with the trans, and also increase the life of your clutch, which is great. So index your bell housings. They're almost never perfect.
We're getting our dog box back fully rebuilt, refreshed, done through RTS. This is the RTS that was in the green car, so
that thing had a good like 5 years of service on it. She held her own for a long time, but she definitely needed some service. Like there's some chewed up gears and some bad bearings in there. But now she's 120%.
It's brand new.
All right, loud noises.
Alright, so Chris is going to explain indexing a bell housing using a dial indicator. That dial indicator is magnetic. It is sitting up against the crankshaft, and he just put some tape on there, and I'm lost now.
So the tape is here because we're going to mark what our measurements are at all 4 corners, just to see if we're within spec. I'll have to look up the specs because I don't remember them off the top of my head. And then this is basically going to rotate around the ring here because this ring is what centers your transmission. So that has to be perfectly centered, or at least as close to perfectly centered as it can, to the hub of your crankshaft, so that way your pilot bearing and your input shaft sit at a perfectly straight angle, extends the life of your clutch and everything like that. So as I rotate this, ideally we don't want to see much fluctuation with this, but we are going to figure out exactly how far off we are. So
question, is the dial indicator centered on there, or how's that work?
Oh, I hate that this thing has this stupid accessory drive on the front of it.
Never mind. What do you need the front end for?
I need to rotate the engine. But this has an accessory drive. It has the Rad Industries KRC power steering pump setup, so I can't just put my 22 on the actual crankshaft. And I don't want to put a bunch of load. I do have the spark plugs out of the engine, so I can get away with just turning it off with that 3/8 Allen that's on the front. Not ideal, but with no spark plugs, the motor should spin freely, especially because everything's coated in assembly loop.
Yeah, it should spin nicely. Oh yeah.
Yeah, engine rotates pretty easily, so I don't have to worry about putting too much load on it. Could you rotate that engine for me slowly there, Crickett?
Yes, sir.
Oh, I get it now. So the whole thing's gonna spin?
Stop. And I'm gonna zero it out off of this point being right here. So where's my Sharpie?
Ah, so that's on the crank right now. It's gonna spin with the crank. Dial
point.
indicator doesn't have to be perfectly centered on the crankshaft.
No, because it's going to rotate true to the center of the crankshaft because it's magnetically attached to the hub. All right, now give me 90 degrees. A little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. Right there, okay. So we are at 0.002. Okay, another 90. This is negative 0.01. Okay, now go slow though. I don't want to ramp up on my, so good. So this is at negative 0.002. See, we went to the left of it. So you always want to put a little bit of preload on there so it's not just making contact, so that if it does lift up, it doesn't just stay at 0 even though it's not making contact. That's what that's showing us now. So ideally we want to be 0.002 inches downward. I'm going to look up the spec for this bell housing now. I believe it's 0.003, but let me double check. Typically you'll have more run out, whether it be a tired engine or it could be because the engine was line bored. This motor got billet mains put in it, so they re-line bored, and sometimes that 0.002 inches is just the direction that the engine was line bored. So this one, by the looks of it, according to SFI's site, it does say that we have 0.005 amount of allotment. We should be good within spec. I'm going to double check with Owen because he just indexed Adam's bell housing on the Barra car on his GT350. So I'm going to see what specs he used to see if I'm within spec. I think I should be fine. I think we're going to be good with this one.
Hey look, another M3. We're going to take this sweet, sweet quick change out of this car.
Yep.
And we're going to put it in that car.
Yeah, so this is like the very early version of the modified subframe for the winter. So you can see how low this sits in relation to like where our wheels are, which is why this car always kind of was a little bit monster trucked. But the new subframe allows it to go up a little bit higher. That car functions great at the height that it's at, which is also monster trucked. So this should work out perfect in there. And with this, we already have the DSS axles, all of our solid subframe bushings, trailing arm bushings, everything's already done on this, which is just great. Might even be aligned when we drop it in. Oh yeah, and here are our coolant tubes. Originally we did have the electric water pump mounted down here, which is where we're going to put it in that car. But this one, when we relocated the radiator, when we redid the rear end of this one time, we put it right down underneath there because then we wouldn't have to jack up the car to service it. But because of the position that it was in, it had the hose coming off of it kind of loop up and down, and that would cause the water pump to cavitate. So once you have air inside your electric water pump, it doesn't move any water. This should, by rights, work really well. You learn lessons. You do things twice. And we're going to have to build some kind of enclosure where these hoses pass through the interior of the car and the back seat of that, similar to what's done on this one. That's just going to block off where it goes from the gas tank door opening to where our rear trunk, rear seat delete thing is. So we're going to have to build a little box. You already have a little box there that only has the fuel lines running through it. We just have to make a slightly larger box. Less self-tappers.
No, we're welding that shit together this time. We're not doing self-tappers.
So we already have most of our hoses made, which is also nice.
Yes, and the back hoses are made properly too with that nice black nylon, not that steel braided stuff that you always get your fingers caught on.
Yeah, we have more of the nylon stuff in a box right on top of there. We have to change lengths of hoses anyway since our radiator location is slightly different than this one.
And then also the motor is different. It's a GE versus the GTE, so the water outlet
are
on different sides.
Well. Yep. That part.
Look at me knowing things about G2Js, huh?
Yeah, I saw some guy on Facebook Marketplace trying to sell a GTE 2J, and it was a GE, and he was asking like $5,000 for it. And I was like, buddy, I don't know if somebody sold you this and told you it was a GTE. He's like, it is a GTE. It has a turbo on it. And I'm like, cool, you can put a turbo on any motor. It doesn't mean it came factory that way. Yeah. He's like, what are you saying? I'm like, I'm saying the water inlet is on the intake side and not on the exhaust side. So that's how you obviously know that it's a GE. GE, so, GTE. Like, if you start buying GTE parts for this, nothing's going to line up. I promise. He got mad.
Oh man, he's gonna go after the fuzzy on the camera. So
Let him bite you.
He's all right. He's just a black racer.
Yeah, you dangle it past the babies.
oh my god.
would get it. Babies will fight that thing.
That's what we call a nope rope here at the compound.
Yeah. We just assume that everything can kill us.
Exactly. If I see a spider or a snake, I don't know enough about them, and I assume all of them are going to kill me, so I'm going to kill them first. Just kept me alive as long as it has. And you got Crickett out here trying to be Florida man and, you know, make himself a belt.
From the start.
From the start.
What's an air gap?
All right, air gap is the distance between your throw-out bearing in the neutral position and the fingers of your pressure plate, because when your clutch wears, your fingers of your pressure plate will start to expand, as well as when the clutch gets hot, it expands and pushes the fingers out a little further. So what you got to do is set your air gap. For this slave cylinder, they recommend an 1/8 of an inch gap. So we were at 2 5/8, so my goal is to be at 2 3/4. With our 2 spacers we had before, it put us a little bit too tall. So now I am using washers to make something that's just slightly shorter than this spacer. So 4 washers actually ended up being exactly where I wanted it to. So we're going to put it together, stack it all up, and we're going to see if our gap is at 2 3/4. Well, washers are not the recommended method. I don't have a mill or a lathe or anything cool. 2 3/4. Oh, that's right on the money. 2 3/4. Love to see it. 1/8 of an inch air gap. Now I get to put these bolts in while scattering these washers all over the floor. It was worth a shot. I don't like it.
Sure, the camera's dead.
What's that?
It's dying.
That camera's
That
dying?
camera's dying.
Showing it's recording right now,
Oh, wow.
baby. 5x5. It likes me.
Oh yeah, right? It said it was dead earlier.
Likes me.
It said it was dead.
That's the winners.
Some other greases.
20 requires a lube, whatever you may have. Liquid, grease. Oh, you were building a drive before? Someone in the comment be like, why aren't you using soft jaws?
These are AN wrenches.
But to hold AM.
Oh yeah. Fortunately, we don't see this hose. There's a lot of stuff going on in the shop right now.
Bartek showed up from Poland.
Hello, hi. So, goodbye.
We just came to say hello, because our transmissions aren't here yet.
That was the point. That was the point. Free hugs. you
So
know,
where's
free
the
hugs.
transmission now?
I don't know. You tell me. Probably somewhere.
But you're the guy who sent it.
Not the one that ships it. So, you know.
Alright, see you, bye. Mitch has no business looking this hot.
Yeah, buddy.
We got them in can size with the BCs and everything. Wow.
First real car. Yes, sir.
I'm already ready.
Sorry.
Showing up. Yeah, thanks, Mitch.
Threw a little bit of paint on it, getting everything in its final assembly now that we have the hoses attached to the radiator. Our expansion tank and everything is mounted on our fill point. The only thing I have to do still is make one hole to bring up our fuel cell vent. And then that'll be all done, pretty.
So we're ended up putting the water pump, our electric water pump, because we have 2 of them, in the back right up here, where the other one was on Mona. I made a new bracket. This one sits up higher than before. So this will bolt up to there, hold that there. This rotates a little bit more that way, so that fitting goes. We're gonna notch out a little bit here, and then we're gonna build a box inside of the cabin, because as we were talking before, we don't want to do a whole firewall. It's a pain in the ass. Plus we made that really cool window and everything back there, so we're just gonna block off the hoses. If you're running your hoses through the cabin of the car, you have to have its own little block off or sleeving. Sleeving also works, FD approved. If it's heat rated and waterproof, burst rated. There we go. If it's burst rated, you can use just the shielding that goes around the hoses, and that works too. But we like just to box everything off. It's safer. It's going to look good. Plus, you don't have this like silver thing with hoses running through your car. So, I'm going to mount this up after he finds me some SAE bolts. Good luck with that. We also welded this together. This came off of the other car. It was already bent to go around the frame. The only difference is I made new brackets for it. Before, we just had like this 3-inch strip of aluminum that came down, wrapped around it, bolted up to the frame rail there, and then to the trans tunnel. It did its job. The only thing that we didn't like about it was when you go to loosen or tighten these fittings, that they would spin inside of there. You'd have to use a pipe wrench and then your 20 AN to actually loosen it. Now they're welded onto here, and then they're held in by big M8 bolts, and you can twist them, you can tighten them, and they're solid. I almost went with 3 brackets, but when I realized how strong these things were, we didn't need 3, we only needed 2. So now this is all done. Oh, answer some questions for someone. They asked us how much do we need to pull or cut out of the trunk, or how much we did to make the rear fuel cell work and the rear mount radiator. So Joel, while we have you right here with the camera, you can see that all we did was we cut up to where the frame rail comes out back into the trunk, and we just cut it square all the way around, just enough for the fuel cell cradle to fit in there. And then we notched obviously for the winters to fit. But that's the only thing we've cut out of this. The whole rear of this car is all stock minus this, besides the fuel cell. Just a little bolt-on jack bar, that's it. Besides that, it's got the stock bumper, everything. Stock bumper support, all that stuff. He hasn't run into a lot of things with this car yet, so I haven't had to cut it out. So if you want my advice, don't cut out your car yet until you wreck it. Once you start smashing it in, then you start cutting out the parts that you don't need anymore. So everybody that's taking a car and cutting it apart and doing a tube chassis front, tube chassis rear, why? Don't do it until you break it, then do it. Because if you're gonna wreck it anyways, if it's tube chassis to begin with, it's gonna bend and you're gonna have to redo it. So just wreck your car how it is till you need it, then do all the shenanigans like cut the front end out, cut the ass end out. Look, we didn't cut ours out. Don't need to yet.
Alright, so we got our electric water pump mounted. So this is nice and sturdy. This is actually going to serve as the return, pulling water back from our engine because we still have a mechanical water pump in the front. Now the return is able to pull the water from the engine and pass it through the radiator. So this will typically feed to the lower port on the radiator, which also help bleed all the air out of the top of your cooling system. And now you can run an electric water pump in the front of the car. Some people don't even run an electric water pump if you have a high volume mechanical pump like LS's do. I don't recommend it, but people have got away with it. These guys drive their cars a little harder than most people, so we like the electric pump. And it also helps a lot because whenever your car is shut off, you can still circulate your electric water pump to cool down the car even with the engine off, and you still continue to circulate coolant through it. That's it. So we had a few questions about belt routing and how to keep your belts on your JZ, because Duarte, Adam, and a handful of other people always have issues when you start sitting on limiter for too long. The top straight section of the belt will actually throw, and it'll either flip around backwards or it'll just completely throw the belt off. Then alternator's not charging, water pump's not circulating. So this car is a little bit different. We have a very square setup on here, which I'm not a huge fan of because we don't have a lot of pulley engagement, so we do get a little bit of squeaking on cold starts. But this runs an external KRC power steering pump here, and this actually runs off of its own independent belt drive off the front of the crank pulley, but it still allows you to run your alternator, tensioner, and water pump off of just a standard short belt like this. Yeah, this engine's loose, don't worry about that. And then if you look at this one actually runs the full lot of accessories without the AC compressor. So essentially...
Oh, so you got light? I need some light.
Just give me the light.
So essentially using the factory power steering pump, ATI, and then still keeping all the stock accessories minus the AC compressor. And then there's a kit here that we sell at Drift HQ that allows you to take where this slack portion is. This is a long straight run without any support. This is typically where you get all of your slap in your belt. And when you get that slap in the belt, that's what causes the belt to start skipping teeth and going places it's not supposed to go. So this thing's been a lifesaver. And then you go over to this motor, which is completely wily, but it is still full looped accessory drive. So the belt routing is still factory belt routing. But we did obviously use the F30 AC compressor, and this actually has a power steering delete bracket. So this is where your power steering pump would originally be. This one has a delete because that F30 runs an electric power steering rack instead of electric power steering.
Stock routing, basically.
It is all stock routing.
So to answer the guy's question, this is how we route our stock.
And this is, I believe, from the Supra Turbo. They actually have a little shock here that helps with maintaining belt tension so that the tensioner is not moving all over the place when you're at high RPMs. It is helpful, but I still prefer to run the idler pulley on the top of that tensioner. Breaking news. In traditional drifter fashion, we are waiting to the last minute to get everything ready to go, but we do have a hurricane coming. Not necessarily going to hit us directly, but given all the flooding and stuff we got last time a hurricane hit the west coast of Florida, we're going to take a lot of stuff into account, like protecting our shop and everything in it. So we got to shuffle a few cars around, seal up some walls, do some insulating, do some flex sealing. So we are cleaning the floors now. We got to cut back some insulation so we can actually fill up the bottom of these walls, because where the like beveling is in the outside of the wall, it's just all water coming up through. Let's try and prevent that. It's already hot, by the way, if you're wondering.
Hurricane 2024 prep. It's 2023.
No, it's 2023, bro. Where you been?
I don't know. I'm in the future, apparently. Future's now. Look at us. We're gonna have a shop that's surrounded by water, but we're gonna be dry. It's gonna be amazing. Nothing will be able to go in or out of the shop, but we'll stay nice and dry. We can still work on the cars that are in here for however long Mother Nature decides to sweat. Alright, so clearly I'm a big painter guy today, and we're not building any race cars because we have a big hurricane coming. Don't know the name of it, don't really care, because it's not big enough to make us worry. This is preventative maintenance. That's what this is. This is kind of like changing your oil in your car. If you know your car motor's gonna blow up, what do? You change the oil, you do a lot of stuff.
You put gear oil in it.
You put gear oil in it like Joel. We know that our compound floods, so we have a dry moment to try and build up some type of retainer to where water can't get in. So we're gonna do that. So we don't have to worry about this thing having, 2 feet worth of water and fish and alligators like last time. So we're gonna finish this episode with me getting covered in paint and silicone and all sorts of filler foam. It's disgusting, it sucks. And Chris isn't even here today. Get well soon, I miss you, buddy. Like, subscribe, comment. I'd kick, but I'd fit tight quarters. Yeah. So Joel promised me that we would stick to our schedule of Wednesdays and Saturdays, and he'll still post something. I have no idea what it's gonna be. Maybe it'll just be a hurricane drift montage, of everyone driving their cars. Maybe you'll even see your boy weld his diff and go out there and join him. Probably not, but one can wish, Till then, I'm just gonna keep painting away like I'm Huckleberry Finn on that freaking wall he had to paint. Nobody knows that. Yeah, nobody knows who Huckleberry Finn is. This little old Tom Sawyer.
I'm Tom Sawyer over here.
Yeah, Tom Sawyer.
I tricked you with the painting.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you did, Joel. Look at me. Look at me painting.